Welcome in, guys. Welcome in. Hey, Heidi. Welcome in. Let's see if I get some more online here. Let's see. All right, perfect. Welcome in. Welcome in. What's going on, Chris? Yeah, a little early tonight. I do have to take care of son a little bit after this, so decided to start early, get everyone early on the night here. I know that it's been kind of a wild day today. Definitely. Probably giving another 2 or 3 minutes here. Let some people trickle in. I know that not, everyone's not accustomed to me getting on a little early, so probably giving another minute or so. What's going on, Randy? Hey, Keith. What's going on, Sits? Keith, where do you sign up? Unfortunately, you can only listen in, my man. It's only that way. But anything, I mean, there's always premium chat. You can always tag me. Always tell me what you're looking at, what you want me to take a look at for you. Don't mind that at all. Rough day and depressing future. Heidi, don't feel down on yourself. I mean, there's always days where we're gonna make mistakes. I even have days where I even make mistakes myself, so don't feel down on yourself about that. Today was definitely one of those days where I think if you were on the wrong side of the knife, it you pretty much caught that knife and it literally bleeded you out. That's literally what it felt like today. So I actually looked at the screen. I pretty much looked away from my chart once it was around lunchtime, because usually around lunchtime we pretty much anticipate that the market's gonna be slow, right? And I pretty much looked away from the screen, and the next thing I know, I just saw this massive kill candle on SPY. And I'm like, yeah, that's not a normal candle. That has to be some kind of news related. So the moment I saw Twitter, and that's usually like the first place that I get my news out of, is either someone tags me in premium chat, and it's usually Thomas, Tamakazi, or someone else, or maybe Sig. Other than that, I usually get my news right off of Twitter, because you see how quickly it usually gets out of Twitter. And the next thing I know, I pretty much refreshed, and we saw the news that came out of Bullard, and that literally explained that little kill candle that we had, and it literally just continued to bleed. So it definitely was not appealing. If you were in calls when that news came out, I mean, unfortunately, just be in the mind that it was not your fault. I mean, whatever you had and whatever TA that you were following that led you into calls before the news came out, don't feel down about yourself, because you were headed in the right direction. The trend, you were pretty much playing the trend. So there's nothing to feel down about you maybe doing something wrong. So that, I don't want you to get discouraged by that. You were definitely playing it the right way. So that's something that you pretty much just look away. When news hits, news hits. There's usually nothing you can do. And it's pretty much like you're playing earnings right there, for that matter. It's like you don't know if the news is going to end up being good or if it's going to end up being bad. So that's just pretty much how it is. But if you follow your training plan despite that news, you did the right thing, is what I want to basically say. All right. Keith, I will actually. There's actually a link. Are you on Twitter, or you're? I'm assuming you're on Discord. I can probably just drop you a link real quick, actually here. There you go, Keith. Go ahead, and that's actually the link to the financial cloud. You can go ahead and click that link, and then you can sign up there, on the plan of your preference, and then you'll be able to go ahead and join us in Discord with our premium chat, and you'll hear us pretty much live trade all day, pretty much. All right. Twitter, appreciate it. Yeah, I'm glad I actually tweeted out on Twitter. I didn't want to get a little more exposure to all my followers out there, so appreciate you joining in. But again, guys, hopefully you didn't get hit by the news. As I pretty much get into SPY and just a little bit of some tickers that I'm watching, this is pretty much where it's do or die. I think for the Bulls, they're really just facing no, basically the wall against their back. And right now, if you see, you had a little bit of an inverted head and shoulders action. That's what I was looking at before that type of news ended up hitting, and we just literally fell. We were looking basically at an inverted head and shoulders. You see that left inverted head. You had the massive head, the left shoulder, massive head, and you had the right shoulder, in which we pretty much just did a V-shaped recovery today. So I expected continuation out of that movement that we had today. I was expecting us to go on beyond 456 after we ended up filling that gap today that we caused. I was expecting to get a little more continuation out of that before the news ended up hitting. But now that we ended up progressing, and as you see, I have a little channel that I pretty much created in which it's actually served as a turning point or support as some way in some form, in which we've had this little regression in forming this inverted head and shoulders. So it actually served here, if you look back from February 8th, it's actually served as a actual support level in which we bounced. Now that we've pretty much re-entered the channel after breaking out of it, it's actually holding the halfway back of my channel. So I'm looking to see if we're going to end up holding this 447 mark and we get that push right back up in terms of trending right back to where we were today at that 456 mark and recovering this move today. That would be ideal. That's what the Bulls want to see at this moment. Is that going to end up happening right now? That's where it's a tough spot to say right now. As you see, futures are down just a little bit. I don't think that's much, nothing much to really worry about at all. I can see us recovering that pretty easily. But we want to see how this news is going to end up dragging out going into tomorrow. And for those of you that pretty much listen on live, you pretty much heard Dapper saying once we had this little bleeding action after the news, buyers were not stepping in like we were normally accustomed to seeing. The selling pressure just continued to escalate, and we just had that downside pressure just continue. And so again, 447 is the line in the sand which I want to see us holding. I have a little bit of a support level here, also around 445.70. I want to see if that ends up holding if we lose this 447 mark. And then the bottom of my channel will likely be my last level of support, in which will end up likely trending towards 441.5 on SPY. Now, if we lose 441.5 on SPY, then I think that's when bulls are completely out of ammo, and then that's going to end up taking us down even further. And that's when I think we're going to start talking about bear territory once we go under 441.5. That's where we start talking about the bear territory. All right. But right now, this would be the ideal spot that I would expect to hold here. This little halfway back of my channel that has served me pretty well so far. Hold this 447. We get a nice move right back over the point of control that we have. Over that mental 450 mark that everyone pretty much has been looking at. And teetering above and below for quite a week or so here. That's what I'm going to look, reclaim that 450 level as we trend to reclaim what we were pushing at today once we completed the gap fill. All right. So again, that's what I'm looking at for SPY. Now, as I get into a few tickers here, I think I'll probably point towards Amazon first here. I think I could probably get down maybe to see what time frame. I think maybe about 30 minutes. Probably looks a little better on this channel. Probably in the 15 or so. Yeah, the 15 looks a little better. Looks a little decent here. So if you see, we had a nice little channel also here on Amazon. It's just been teetering along this channel, a little of a descending channel action that we have. I'm looking to see if we get a breakout on this one tomorrow, in which if the market's going to end up reversing, I want to see this upside action in which we regain over 31.89, and we'll start to see a curl back up towards our point of control here that's currently sitting at 32.22 would be that mark in which we'll see that point of control and we'll reclaim to see if we can get that full bullish reversal off of this. Otherwise, if we can't reclaim those levels, we can't get over the 31.89 level, and we can't necessarily get even past that level to get to our point of control, then we're likely going to end up getting right back down to the bottom of this descending channel. I have a little bit of a zone in which has acted as prior support. So that zone is between 31.51 to 31.49. So that may end up being a target point here as of where we're sitting right now from 31.81. That'll put us down right here below 31.52. So that may end up very well being a nice little 0 day opportunity in which you can think about that one as a 0 day tomorrow. And especially you would have to consider what the market conditions are, obviously, before you just jump the gun and get into a 0 day. But if we see that market weakness start to escalate, then you know where we're likely headed, down towards that 31.52 to 31.49 mark. And then hitting the bottom of this descending channel action here. All right. Bottom of the descending channel will probably be right around or so 31.40, 31.41 is what I'm looking at to the bottom of my descending channel as my support level as well. So you're aware. All right. So that's one that I'm watching. The other one that I pretty much just, this was just textbook today, was this little descending channel also on Tesla. We had the little early pump off of Tesla. It just couldn't hold after we ended up having that news. It started to regress. And so I'm also watching this one. We had the little wick down to the bottom of the channel. We ended up recovering. So I'm also watching this one. If we can get a move here over 940, over 911, then we'll see us start to push up north of 930. I did see calls that were going out to 940, 945 for tomorrow. So I think they're maybe just throwing a dart out there in hope of a market recovery tomorrow. Because like I said, it is a flip of a coin right now. There's no definitive answer whether we're going to get a recovery tomorrow on SPY. We're just playing it level by level. But I'll be watching to see if we can get over 911. We'll make a move towards 930. And then I also do have some resistance sitting on Tesla here at 947 as well, if we can make it even that far. All right. So I'll be looking for that one as well, breaking out this descending channel. So back to back Amazon and Tesla, a little descending channel action. You would anticipate that we'll likely end up breaking this descending channel north. So that would be the assumption so far. The other one I'm watching that had a little bit of relative strength here was MDB. I think I had this one on the watch list maybe a few days ago or so. I think maybe 2 days ago. I had it on the watch list. This was pretty much just a textbook pattern. I actually had it before we got even the completion of the gap fill here. If you see this gray zone, but we had just a textbook inverted head and shoulders, inverted left shoulder, the massive little head, and then that inverted right shoulder, in which I told everyone that we were going to end up getting the completion of the gap fill. You saw we hit it a wick right into it previously. We gapped right into the gap fill here. Now I'm looking for a little bit of a continuation. We do have another gap fill here that pretty much sits right above. We're looking at 517.24, and it also completes at 527.04. So I'll be looking to see if there's any kind of relative strength that continues in the name tomorrow. Even despite if we have market weakness, as we see, it's held up its own today. So I will look for this one. I did have a little bit of resistance sitting right around the mark here of 482. You see there's a small little shelf here that we're looking at towards the right, a little volume shelf right there. So 482 will be my ideal target. Probably looking forward in towards next week. We may not get a full blown off kind of move like that towards 482 tomorrow, but I'm looking to get a continuation out of this one. So we end up breaking this high of 464. That's what you're going to be looking to play tomorrow. If we end up breaking that, break today's high, and you play it up towards that recent wick high there of 464, and that'll be a beautiful one. Then I may even look at towards the 0 day tomorrow to play that wick high here of 464, and then we'll talk about continuation into next week. I'm not gonna lie though, even if we do see some kind of relief here in which the market is not in panic mode as we had today towards the afternoon, then I may end up even getting next week calls and actually swinging this one. Just because of the fact that I think there's momentum behind this one following this little breakout pattern right now. So that's just something to think about. If the market does show some relief in which we're not in panic mode and we may end up getting continuation to the upside, it may be worth getting some calls out towards next week as well. But I do know that liquidity is also an issue, so just something to keep in mind as well. Even a Lobo, glad you joined us. Randy, appreciate that. I mean, VXX is always something that we're watching, especially with the market volatility that I think is literally going to persist pretty much for most of the year. I think at least we can say, maybe definitively, I think we can say at least for the first half of the year, in which the first 6 months here, we're going to see volatility. And of course, the first thing that you definitely want to look at is always the volatility index. You want to look at VIX, you want to look at VXX. Those are things that you definitely want to look at, right? And then if you pretty much heard me last night on YouTube Live here, you actually heard me mention to say, once we get the data this morning, look at the 10-year bond yield, look at the dollar. I think the 10-year bond yield literally spoke volume to everything. We saw it push north of 2% at some point this morning. That was just pretty much, I was in shock when I saw it pushing north of 2%. I was not expecting it to go beyond that. So that was definitely a red flag for me, in which At what point is the market going to end up showing its weakness following this, the 10-year bond yield just continuing to rise and rise? And just as lucky as we got the news midday and we saw a little bit of the downfall. So where I was watching the 10-year bond yield, well, at least I am, and the VXX, I think every trader on live is pretty much watching that, as volatility is pretty much has been elevated. All right. Just running through the last three tickers here. Netflix was also one that I was pretty much keeping an eye on. I think I can get down to a smaller time frame on this one. It was a little intraday pattern I was watching on this one. We had a little bit of a descending, broadening wedge type action on here. So I was watching this one as it tried to recover. So just a beautiful move off of Netflix here. So I am watching. If I pretty much zoom out now, you do see I have two zones here. We see we've pretty much been in what I want to say is a little bit of a channel since we had the earnings. We had that major drop off. We pretty much went as low as, what do we sit here? As low as 393.55. But if you actually notice the gray zones here, that's actually acted as a demand and supply zone, in which every time we've hit in the bottom zone, pretty much the gray bottom box, that's been a signal to buy Netflix. Every time we've hit the top of the box has been a signal to sell Netflix. So that's what I'm looking to see if we get any kind of continuation at a little, maybe a little bit of recovery. Maybe we see the Q show some kind of strength tomorrow. Following what we see with Tesla descending channel, Amazon's descending channel, we see Netflix breaking out of a little descending broadening wedge type action. Maybe we see a follow through towards the supply zone that I have at the top here, in which we'll be targeting 409 to 411. And then I do have a little bit of an extension here in which we can touch as high as 412.30 will be my extension here if we get that high. So I'll look to see Netflix. I know that this one's pretty much been more so of a downer. I know since we had the earnings, but just a beautiful recovery from the bottom of this descending broadening wedge. Literally from the bottom here, 390 was it 396 that we hit, and we literally went right back over 400. So I'll look to see if we get a continuation on it. So that'll be another one out of the cues that we watch with Amazon, and then also Tesla being part of the tech sector as well. All right. Now, outside of the tech sector, I am watching Goldman Sachs as I pretty much probably want to see maybe the hour, I think, looks better on this chart. All right, so now we can expand it. You see the rising wedge action here on Goldman Sachs. I'll be keeping an eye on this one tomorrow just because of the fact that I know that banks pretty much were up this morning. We saw what banks did this morning following that inflation data. We know that with the inflation data, that pretty much just puts more pressure on the rate hike, and of course, that benefits the banks, and that's why we saw the banks and along with energy actually up this morning. So it ended up giving it back as the market started to roll over. I am watching to see if we get one more leg up higher towards the resistance here, in which that would put us towards this volume shelf here, just around 379. I'll look to see if we get some kind of strength, and believe it or not, I may end up potentially even shorting it at the 379 at the resistance. Of course, if I'm shorting it up that high at the resistance, I do want to have a stop loss. I've seen JPM pretty much gap right over a rising wedge, so that's why I say have a stop loss in place. Otherwise, I'm looking for the breakdown on Goldman Sachs, in which we'll likely get maybe about a $2 or $3 pop here, probably pre-market, and then we'll break down, get the retest, and then flush down to the next volume shelf, which I'm looking at towards 364. So this is one, it has pretty much a directional play here. Either we get one leg higher up on the rising wedge, or we end up getting a breakdown and a retest and falling down towards our next shelf of 364 on Goldman Sachs. So very much a directional play. We can play it both ways, just depending upon how the market gives it to us tomorrow, and whether we're pretty much green or red in the overall market. All right. And then the last one, which is pretty much a very textbook pattern that I'm looking at, is Home Depot. This is just as textbook as it gets, in which we have a nice head and shoulders action. I think this one in particular may likely end up being my 0 day tomorrow, because just the fact that it looks pretty much textbook. I really love the setup that we have right now. Giving you a little bit of a retest also. We saw the wick down, pretty much fill the wick right back up to get the retest. So I'm going to look for this downside action. I do have the zone pretty much set up here. Looking to fill the zone of 349 down towards about 346. So I'll be looking to play this one down towards 0 day on puts. and this will nice likely be a nice little one that will probably pay very heavily off of 0 days. I'm just hoping the liquidity is there. I haven't looked at it in particular, so I am gonna have to pay attention to that come tomorrow morning. If I do see something I like in particular in terms of strike, I'll call it out. But overall, bear scenario here, so I'm looking to play this one to the downside, and just the fact that it's such a textbook pattern, and it may very well end up following in the market trend. I think this may end up being a nice one that pays out tomorrow. So keep this one definitely on your radar. I think that'll be a beautiful one. Um, I think that actually covers my watch list, by the way. PW, nice to see you. I haven't seen you in a while. Wiley, can I take a look at Facebook? Let me take a quick peep. Actually, let me see. One sec. Let's see what we're looking at. I think I actually had this on the watch list not that long ago because if I'm actually looking at it, I haven't even changed anything. If I actually change the colors, because obviously the background now, let me change the color of the pattern that I actually had in place. I don't think much has actually changed here. I literally do not think much has actually changed in terms of what I was looking at. I had the beautiful falling wedge that I had on the watch list. I think it was 2 nights ago, and I was expecting us towards to get towards this first resistance level that I had here, in which I was 231. We pretty much smacked that. As you see the point of control right now, we pretty much were teetering that little point of control. I do see a little diamond top, which is a little bit concerning to me now. So that's something that gives me a little bit of pause to concern right now. You see the top with the bottom with the top, and you see it's pretty much just going sideways left and right, which forms your diamond. So it does particularly look like a diamond top to me right now. The other concern that I do have is you also have a gap fill here down at the bottom. So that's something that's also giving me a little bit more of a concern as well. You'll fill the gap here under 222.25, and then that will complete at approximately 221.22 is what we're looking at for the gap fill. So I would definitely be cautious about this one. The only way that I would likely pretty much turn my attention back towards the upside is if we regain over the point of control, which is over 232.44. That's when I will pretty much turn my attention back to the upside. And then that'll pretty much resume my second PT that I had sitting up here that's currently at 236. So if we can reclaim 232, then I'm looking at 236. Otherwise, your other option is looking at the downside towards that gap fill that I just mentioned. All right. So that's what I'll look for that. Probably the last one here I'll look at, Keith, is I'll take a look at shop for you. That'll probably be the last ticker I likely look at here. Let me see. First, I haven't looked at shop in a while, so I am gonna look out to the daily just to see what this looks like in particular, because I have not looked at this ticker in quite a while. So here's something I do notice off of the daily in particular. When what it does look like is that we're gonna continue to maybe wedge here just a bit longer in terms of a little bit of a bear pennant. That's what I'm looking at right now. So if you notice here, you are just teetering just above the point of control right now off of the daily here. And so you do have what I would consider to be a bear pennant. Uh, so you actually have your flagpole to the downside, you have your pennant, and typically what ends up following that pennant once you end up breaking to the downside is that it'll be equal weight towards the downside, in which that'll be the extension of your flag. So that's what I would look for in terms of what I'm looking at for a longer projection. I would expect this to end up playing out towards the downside. But the fact that you are still sitting above your point of control, right above this 885, 886 mark, I do like the fact that it's still sitting there. Your resistance that you're likely looking at if we do get a push is towards 957. That's what I'll be looking at towards resistance. So if the market can continue, maybe get a rebound here tomorrow, we get a nice push, and I can see this trending towards 957 rather easy. And I know that shop has actually been one where when it picks a direction, it moves, and it moves pretty heavily. So I would not be surprised if the market's green tomorrow and we see a strong rebound day tomorrow. This will likely end up pushing 957 rather easy tomorrow. Give us about close enough to about a 60-point day tomorrow. I would not doubt that ends up happening. But given the fact that you would have to see a strong trend day tomorrow in terms of a nice rebound in the market from this bloodfest that we had today. All right. Otherwise, what you're looking at tomorrow, if we do get a bloody day tomorrow, is that you are risking losing the point of control below this 886 mark, and then you're trending towards a support in which you're looking at close to about 829, 830. That's what you're going to be looking at towards the downside. All right. But bigger picture, you do have a nice little bear pennant, is what you're looking at. But obviously, not all bear pennants will necessarily break to the downside. So if you are looking, wait for the directional move if you're trying to get a more long dated position on shop. All right. Someone mentioned the video real quick. All right, that's gonna be my last one. I'll probably look at. All right, I'll look at the video and that'll be the last ticker I likely look at here. If I'm not mistaken, doesn't Nvidia actually have earnings still coming up? I believe they still do. If Magdalene, you can probably tell me exactly when the earnings are. Probably actually just take a look real quick. Actually, no, the earnings are actually noted right here on the chart. I take that back. So we actually have earnings coming up on the 16th. So that is next week. Wow, that's around the corner. Did not realize that. All right, so what I am looking at here is I am looking at an inverted head and shoulders action. So that's the first thing I noticed off of the daily. You have the left shoulder, left inverted head shoulder. You have the massive head, and then you have the inverted right shoulder. Now the only thing that we're pretty much risking is this. This is almost the same pattern that you see pretty much on a larger scale on SPY as well. But the other thing that you're risking right now is you're risking the gap fill to the downside. So that is one thing. Of course, granted the market direction, this is where you're gonna want to be pretty much play it both directions if you don't have a position right now. But gap fill will enter below 253.53. That's gonna end up completing just around 252.30. Otherwise, if we're playing the upside, and this is where I want to see potentially where our next zone is that we're looking at. Now let's see where our potential zone is that I'm watching for. Let's see what I'm looking at. I think my zone that I'm pretty much watching is right around here. This is my zone that I'm watching for the upside in particular. And I think we can stretch this out because that was a little bit of a double bottom action there. There we go. Right. Stretch it out. All right. Now we said perfect. All right. So upside that we're potentially looking at is I'm looking between the zone here that I have of 270, and that'll put you between 270 to 272. That will be the zone that I'm pretty much watching off a continuation here on the short term. Granted, the fact again we do have the earnings coming up next week, so that'll be my short term pretty much price target here, 270 to 272, because obviously you do see that you have a massive volume shelf above that. I wouldn't expect to even get close enough to this volume shelf until towards next week, in which I do see a little bit of a heavy resistance also right around this 283, 284 mark. I want to say it's closer to 284. That'll be where I see a heavy resistance. As you've seen, that's pretty much been a very much of a resistance or support level in prior history here, dating back towards the end of December. So that's pretty much will be my far end range in terms of an earnings run up if that does continue into next week. But if I'm looking particularly into tomorrow here, I would be targeting towards 270, 272 if we're able to hold up, get a nice rebound. I would want to see us reclaim 262. That would be my ideal level that I want to see us reclaim. You may have a little bit of a resistance here also right around 265, 55. That'll be also some resistance that you're looking at. But overall move, I can see us again. This is if we do get a strong rebound day. We can see a strong potential price action here in which we're targeting up to towards 270. All right. So that's what I'll be watching for on NVIDIA. I think chips are maybe a little bit on the back burner for me right now. I know that they've had pretty much a strong move. The only thing that I do know that NVIDIA does have going for it is that it does have a very strong inverted head and shoulders. So that's why if we do get some kind of strong move in the market overall to the upside, I can pretty much see this one getting a nice little move towards that 270, 272 mark rather easily. All right. But I think that'll pretty much conclude the tickers that I was probably mostly watching tonight. I'm pretty much just gonna wait to see what the market gives me. If I look at my watch list tonight, let's see, just to see what futures are looking like. Nasdaq's down about 58 points and S&P is down about 20. So I don't think there's anything to panic there. I've already seen it come back close enough to near flat after seeing this kind of level on futures. Once we open, I think about an hour after we opened futures. So I don't think there's any kind of panic right now just yet. But I would like to see SPY hold 447. That would be my ideal goal right now. If you're bull, that's definitely what you want to see. All right. Otherwise, like you saw pretty much on my SPY chart, for those of you that haven't seen it, just a glance at it pretty much. this is pretty much what I'm looking at, and I think I had it more so on the 2 hour. I'm pretty much looking to hold this halfway back on this little channel that has acted as supported resistance for me. 447 will be that. Otherwise, we come down to my next support of 445. And then below that 445, we're looking at 441 and a half, in which bulls are likely going to end up losing control. All right. But other than that, I think that concludes what I was looking at. Hopefully, the request on tickers there that kind of help give you a better gauge on the direction of move for those. For that, what is that? I think NVDA shop and also Facebook. So hopefully that ended up helping. But other than that, I think that will conclude tonight. Just be safe out there tomorrow. If you're trying to go for 0 day tomorrow, just be cautious, especially with this market volatility. Just be very cautious about that. Don't not try to go in heavy on 0 days. That'll probably be something I just want to caution you about. So just because, pretty much just be mindful of that. And I would not suggest actually swinging over the weekend, especially heavy positions, just because of the fact that we also are looking at going into OPEX week, in which we're going to have a lot of expiring contracts going into next week, the end of next week there. All right. So that's just something to also be aware of. All right. Other than that, again, I'll see you guys tomorrow. You guys have a great night. And I'll see you guys on tomorrow. Happy Friday. All right, guys.